Before we do get started, I just want to say that we've been kind of, organizing our Buddha practice study group. And we've got a number of people who are helping us. Bernie and Pete, who you might have met before, Bernie's with us tonight, are helping. And Zara is helping organize some things. And Matthew is helping to work on some YouTube with the videos and so on. So we're trying to create a bit of a organizational team here to get things more organized as we move forward so that people can find us as years go by and find these talks that we have, because many people who have discovered these things are finding them very useful. So we want to continue that. So thank you all for helping, and thank you all for being here. And this is a discussion group, so we invite people to turn their microphones on and bring their comments. That's a very important part of what we do. Sometimes it's the most important thing, because provocative questions will come up. So we begin by setting our motivation. So if you don't mind, I'll lead. We'll do the altruistic motivation. So the altruistic motivation is we are doing this for the benefit of our brothers and sisters, especially the ones who are the most difficult towards us. So this prayer sets that into motion. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Now the Tibet, we will do this in a monotone. So we'll do it where each syllable has equal weight. So you'll hear it, follow me, and we'll try and do this as best we can. Dagla dang war je pe dra no par je pe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Ma nam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug nal dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to pa ja. The next prayer is the action bodhicitta, putting bodhicitta to action. Bodhicitta means the wholly enlightened mind. So actualizing the wholly enlightened mind. In English, thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In Tibet, De she du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu nag yi sam ge wa la ko. The long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. In Tibet, Dren San Sawa Dangur Pa Je Pe Pal Den Lama Dampa Namla Kyab Su Chi O. Yidam Kil Gorgi La Sok Nam La Kyab Su Chi O. Sangye Chom Den De Nam La Kyab Su Chi O. Dam Pe Cho Nam La Kyab Su Chi O. Pa Pe Ge Du Nam La Kyab Su Chi O. Pa Wo Ka Pa Wo Kanjo Cho Kyung Song Mei Song Yes She Gi Cheng Dang Dem Pa Nam La Kyab Su Chi O. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. In Tibet, Chang Shub Ning Por Chi Ki Ba Sangye Nam La Kyab Su Chi Cho Dang Shang Shub Sam Pa Yi Sok Lang De Shin Kyab Su Chi Jitar Nongi De Shegi Shang Shub Tug Ni Ke Pa Dang Shang Shub Sam Pe La Pa La De Dag Rim Shin Ne Pa Ta De Shin Dro La Pandandu Shang Shub Sam Ni Ke Gi Shing De Shin Du Ni La Pa La Rim Pa Shin Du La Pa Ji O. The Short Refuge Prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In Tibet, Sangye Cho Dang So Ki Cho Nam La Shang Zhu Bar Du Dagni Kab Su Chi Dagi Jin So Ki Pe So Nam Gi Dro La Pen Shir Sangye Ju Pa Sho. Next prayer is the four immeasurables. These are the four vast immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is the holy enlightened mind. In English, may all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. In Tibet, Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang de we gur dang dem par jur chi. Dug now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par jur chi. Excuse me, I made a mistake there. We'll start off from the beginning in Tibet. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang de we gur dang dem pa jor chi. Dug now dang de now gi gu dang dra wa jor chi. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi dra wa jor chi. Nay ring jack dang ni dang dra wei tang nam la ne pa jo chi. So these prayers are very important to set our motivation for what our practice is to be, what our receiving the teachings, what our study is going to be, what our practice is going to be. So we're doing this for the benefit of other beings. That is a major part. Another major part is that we are doing this selflessly, not selfishly. We're doing it for the benefit of others. And that another third major part is that we're visualizing all beings as our mother. So that mother can be our birth mother, can be an aunt or an uncle or grandmother, someone who had a huge part in our lives in being able to raise us and being able to take care of us when we were an infant, and then to be able to teach us how to do basic things like walking, taking care of ourselves hygienically, and being able to dress ourselves and being able to feed ourselves and things like that, as well as right from wrong, teaching us a sense of morality, what not to do, what to do, how to stay safe, and things like that. So the idea of the mother is an example that we see all beings as our mother. We don't know if they were our mother in a past life, but we regard everyone as our mother in a past life just in case they were. And we want to help all our beings, help all these beings, help all our mothers, and so on like that. So another point I want to make is the way I recited this was I've tried to stay very faithful to the way that this transliteration is made here on the page. If you go to different Dharma centers and hear different lamas, if you tune in on YouTube and hear different lamas reciting these very same prayers, some of the words will have different sound to them. And it's not unlike, here in the United States, and I'm sure around the world in different places, there are dialects. And sometimes these words are pronounced a little bit different in different Dharma centers because of dialect changes and people's the way they express these words. So there's no need to get upset about any of that, but just to practice it in a way that is comfortable for you, and you're not going to go wrong by practicing with what we see here in the book. If you would like to get the audio of the lamas that are our teachers that from the Drikung Kagyu, Kenshin Rinpoche in particular, the way he recites these with his melodies from his monastery, I can send those to you. We'd like to put them on the website so that people for future reference can go to them and download them or just listen to them from the website, something like that. So that would be something that would be good. Does anybody have any questions about the content of these opening prayers, the meaning of these opening prayers, the dialect in which we were reciting them? Please bring up any question, any comment that you have about these.
Hi, this is Mark.
Yes.
Um, May they rest in equanimity. What's meant by that phrase?
Well, equanimity, I think the root word there is like a equa, is like a equalness.
Uh-huh.
That everything is equal. We see things in many myriad different forms and so on, but all these forms are all equal in their essence.
I see.
So may they rest in equanimity. So we're talking here specifically about the mother, because this prayer we say all other
Oh,
sentient beings and so on, and we're saying that that way we see our mother and all beings in equanimity. In other words, may we not have attachment to them, may we not have aversion to them, in a balanced kind of a way. So that equanimity. Go ahead.
and that's meant we're referring to all sentient beings, right?
Correct. All sentient beings. But we can even regard our mother that way, because our mother, we may think when we're young kids, oh, our mother is perfect. But as we get older, we learn that our mother has certain peccadillos. She has certain, certain things that maybe we don't like. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe our father, our brothers, and our sisters, and so on. But we have a forgiveness for them. We look at them, and we don't attach to their negativities. We don't attach to their aversions. We just see them as being ordinary human beings like us, who have these different idiosyncrasies about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Thank you.
sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Somebody who has been working with these opening prayers. I'd like to hear from you, because
I had a question. I was reading Transformation. Well, my new favorite book right now is Transformation of Suffering. I'm gonna be like the billboard for that for everyone in the United States. So on the chapter 3, Refuge, it talks, and I'm relating this back to what you're talking about, so it is linked. It talks about, there's a sentence or a paragraph that talks about we're cultivating compassion for all sentient beings. One of the methods is through the mother, but also there was two other examples, and one of them was like as if it was your own child, your mother, and then there was one other example. There was like three things, but the mother is the most obvious one that we use. Do you ever incorporate that in, or suggest people, if like people have difficult relationships in relating to the mother versus like if it's my own child? Because it is referenced in the transformation suffering as one way to help cultivate compassion. Although I hadn't known that until I read that chapter. I thought it was just strictly the mother because of what the mother does for you, bringing you into the world and the suffering she goes through, the ultimate level of suffering she goes through for that.
well, yeah, and I think we mentioned that many times. I know just yesterday when we were doing our practice, I know I mentioned that, we visualize the mother primarily, but then maybe it's sometimes that we're visualizing our relationship with our children, with our child, and where we become the mother and how we're dealing with our child. And sometimes that becomes a learning experience for us too. We see the compassion that we have for them, or we see the compassion that a teacher has for their students, and the work that a teacher goes through in order to be able to provide the information and everything, the preparation for the students. And then the compassion that the students have, for the teacher, because sometimes the teacher makes a mistake. Sometimes they say the wrong thing. Sometimes they say things out of order, or sometimes they're just flat out wrong, and instead of jumping on them and saying, oh, you made a mistake or something, but, to bring it to their attention so that they can correct themselves. They may not even realize that they did that. So it's having the student having compassion for the teacher and realizing, well, we can make mistakes, but we can also bring them to their attention and help them. So the compassion works in many different directions. Does that address the question? I mean, does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it makes sense to me. Like, I meditate on compassion as part of the, like the practice we did yesterday, where we did the in different 5 minute intervals with object. Compassion is the first one I do, then I go to object breath, and I always think about like what you just said. Those examples always come up. I just hadn't read it in the text like I did. When I read it, it was very specific with those three examples, with the mother being the first one. I was just curious if there were other opening prayers that referenced that specific language. It's just a technical question. It's not substantive, because the point is it evokes compassion either way. That's the main point. So,
Right, and the benefit of reading many different books or several different books by different authors to about the same topics, it gives you more breadth of information, more breadth of vision as to what's being said here. So there's an outer meaning, there's an inner meaning, and these inner meanings are all these different things that these different masters may be trying to relate to us. But then there's that secret meaning that you cultivate yourself, that you have that experience of compassion yourself and how you relate that. Maybe it was with the mother, maybe it was with your child, maybe it was with somebody else, but so it's always the outer, the inner, and the secret meaning. So we begin to build up a whole, library of meanings for each one of these things. So opening ourselves up to all these different possibilities is why we're a human being, why we're blessed to be a human being, the gift of being a human being.
thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you. Brendan, I see you got your microphone on.
Yeah, I unmuted Lance because you asked about someone who'd been saying these prayers. I think I've been involved with this group for a little less than a year now. And I'll say that when I first became involved, praying in Tibetan was very foreign to me. It was very a different experience. And I will say that in the past 9 months that my compassion for others has increased. I still get angry at others. Like my wife 15 minutes ago, I shouldn't, but anyway, yeah, there's still, but I think my compassion is increasing, and I follow a lot of Tibetan Buddhist social media accounts, and the one I learned about a few days ago was Chud, the practice of Chud, where these people would actually sit in Kathmandu, Tibetan Buddhists, and they would chant and they would sing. And it was a beautiful mantra. I wish I knew what it was. I don't know which mantra they were chanting, but it was beautiful. And now I'm thinking, to be here in the Sangha and to be able to pray together in Tibetan, what a benefit that is. Just what a tremendous privilege that is to be able to do that. And so yeah, that's my take on the prayers that we pray at the beginning of our Sangha meetings.
Well, thank you. Do you remember why it is that we do these in the Tibetan?
Well, I know that one thing that really resonated with me that I never forgot is that we're doing this for all sentient beings, not just for ourselves. And
Right.
that's tremendously important. Why we do them in Tibetan, why we pray them in Tibetan as opposed to English, I intuitively, I feel like I know, because our lineage comes from Tibet, so we should be praying in Tibetan. But beyond that, I'm not sure I know why. Could you tell me, please?
Well, you're moving in the right direction when you said that. There's two fundamental reasons that I know about, and that is first off is the lamas, are teaching in Tibet, that they come from Tibet and they have learned our English language to whatever degree they've been able to, some better than others and so on. But they made great effort to be able to learn to communicate with us, and they are bringing these prayers as an offering to us, in order that we may learn the meaning of them and be able to bring this wisdom and the skillful means into our lives and so on. So they're doing this out of their compassion for us. So as we try and learn their language, at least in reciting these prayers, is to kind of like return the favor. you
Yeah.
know, so that we can do this all together as a group. You know, we read it in English together. We also can recite it in Tibetan together, and it's a blessing to the Lama in that way. But there's also a more fundamental reason, and that is that the Buddha himself taught 2,600 years ago, and he taught in the Sanskrit language. And the Tibetan language and the Hindi language and the other languages of that area were all based on that Sanskrit language. The Sanskrit language at that time was not a written language. It didn't have a alphabet. And I'm showing some of my ignorance here. Bernie can probably talk more wisely than I can about this. But my understanding was it was many years later that there began to be an alphabet, and they learned how to write the Sanskrit. But the point here is that the Tibetan is based on the Sanskrit. And as that Sanskrit was being recited by the Buddha and his followers, it has a charge to it. It has a vibration to it. And that vibration resonates in our bodies and resonates with our intelligence, with our intellect, as having meaning to what that vibration is. And so when we recite it in the Tibetan, we are setting up that vibration that has never disappeared. The vibration has continued, it doesn't go away. And we're just harmonizing with that. So as we learn to harmonize in the Tibetan language or the Sanskrit language, as we recite the mantras and so on, which are in Sanskrit, we are vibrating with that same sacred energy that the Buddha and his followers did 2,600 years ago. And then from all that time forward until right now, all those beings that are reciting those prayers and recitations and mantras and so on. So there's that. So it's the two things. We're showing the compassion, the respect of our masters, our teachers, but we're also vibrating with that ancient sacred vibration. And then we can close our eyes, and these vibrations kind of pop open in our heart mind. And we begin to have experience, spiritual experience, by reciting these mantras in those sacred syllables. Bernie, would you like to offer anything to that point?
Okay, if you want to go into the whole history of the language, you're pretty much correct in everything you said. I'll just say it a little differently. I do believe you're correct that at the time Buddha lived, there was no written language of Sanskrit in Tibet. It was all spoken language, and it was traditional up to modern times not to write down the sacred scriptures of Hinduism, but to memorize and recite them. And that's how it was first done in Buddhism as well. But after a while, the scriptures were written down. I think the first alphabet came around the time of King Ashoka, or shortly before him. So for about 200 years after, or 300 years after the Buddha, there was no written language in India or Sanskrit. Now, the relationship between Tibetan and Sanskrit is a little bit different than what you said. The language, Tibetan itself, originally is more closely related to Chinese and Burmese. But what happened is that, like Sanskrit, there was no written alphabet. And the alphabet was invented by an Indian monk. The king of Tibet asked for a written alphabet so they could write down the scriptures. So it was based on the alphabet of India, the Devanagari. And if you look at them, they look similar, but they're different. And of course, all the vocabulary in Tibetan about Buddhism was invented. These aren't traditional words, and in Tibetan, and they were just sort of brought over concept by concept. So they had to invent a whole new vocabulary in Tibetan to represent the concepts of Indian Buddhism. Now, as far as the mantras are concerned, the mantras are the same as they are in Sanskrit, Om Mani Padme Hum, except the Tibetans tend to mispronounce them. And often you'll hear, instead of Om Mani Padme Hum, you'll hear Om Mani Padme Hum, because that's the way Tibetans tend to pronounce Padme, is Padme. So the mantra is in Sanskrit, but it's pronounced usually in the Tibetan way. But they're similar. They're similar because they're mantras. The sounds are similar, but it's a somewhat mispronunciation. And of course, Americans, no matter how much they try, are mispronouncing the Tibetan. So we add another layer of change of pronunciation when Westerners do the mantras. So I don't know. Does that add? Is that enough? So.
Well, it's very good. Thank you. Yes. So I think it goes to the point that there's a dialect, that the Tibetans have a particular dialect in the way they pronounce those words.
Yeah, sure. And anybody who's seen the Tibetan versus the Sanskrit realizes that.
Yeah. And you'll meet 20 different monks, monastics who come from 20 different areas in Tibet, and they will pronounce the same word in 20 different ways because of
That's
the dialect.
true. I mean, just as in the United States, there are different regions, and Tibet was a very, very large country. And the saying was, each Lama has his own Dharma, and each valley has its own language, because the language was slightly different in each valley of Tibet.
So let me ask this question generally to everybody, and if you'd like to respond, I'd love to hear it. But I've often suggested that you memorize these prayers in the English first, because we need to know the meaning of these prayers in our own language. So so to learn them in our own language, whether it's English or it's wherever we come from, whatever our native language is most important. And the lamas will say that. I've heard the Dalai Lama say that, as well as our leaders in our lineage and so on. And then to learn it in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit, whatever language that is being carried through in, to learn it in that. Has anybody taken me up on that offer to memorize that? And what success or problems have you had in doing that?
Lance, I've got page 1 and page 2, 3, and I've got like 4 of them memorized. So it's just mass repetition, and where I'll close my eyes, like I'll look, but then I'll close and then just let the words come out. It's just been real slow. Like my favorite phrase you say is slowly, slowly. Let
Right.
things happen slowly. I just let it happen. All of a sudden I was like, oh, I already know the words. It just kind of happened overnight. I was like, so now I just close my eyes. I've got 4 of them memorized.
Well, that's good. What kind of a benefit, or has it been a benefit to you?
Oh yeah. Now I go anywhere. It's like sign language. It's like I don't need it anymore. I don't need with my book tears up, it's in my head. If the pages rip, like I don't want them to rip, I want to protect the paper. However, if something happens, I can still provide the prayer and seal whatever merit and offer it out because I have the words in my head.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like to comment about their experience with working on the prayers? Yes, Brendan.
I've memorized some of the mantras. I haven't been able to memorize the prayers, but the Green Tara mantra, I've memorized that, and I'll find myself throughout the day just hearing it in my head. Tare tu soha, which I think is a good thing. It helps me get through my day. Om Mani Padme Hum's easy. I mean, that I memorized that a long time ago, but I think I should progress from the mantras to the prayers as well.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. So what do you think generally? Does anybody else have a comment? Gil,
I do.
see- Yes, Gil.
I do. Um, I find that I don't have to turn the light on to do the prayers, and that, I've got the window there with the curtain open. As the sun is coming up, I can half see, so knowing what it is beforehand helps.
Very good. Thank you.
I've memorized them, the prayers in English. I haven't memorized them in Tibetan yet. I haven't really even started that project yet. I should probably do that soon. But I do notice when I have it memorized, there's a difference in terms of the reciting it. There's a different kind of feel to it. I think just because there's something a bit more meditative about it almost, and can reflect on the meaning in a different way, just because there's not part of my brain taken up with trying to read it and like go through that process.
Yes, thank you. Karina and Gavin, I see you have your microphone on. Did you want to comment on something?
Yeah, I memorize also mantra, or prayer in English, like 3-4, and some in Tibetan also. Can close my eyes and like without reading to say.
How has it benefited you?
Good.
How has it been a help to you?
How I can just when we drive somewhere, I just remember in my mind, and I can always tell this like, and this is helpful in my mind.
Good. Thank you. So what do you think?
One more thing here.
Yes,
One more thing about that
certainly.
is that until I memorized the things, it had pretty much my whole attention. Once I had it memorized, then the mind can wander, and staying focused on what I'm doing is more difficult when it's memorized.
So it's had a negative effect, you think?
It's just part of the change.
Okay.
It's just another layer.
Okay. So what do you think the meaning of the prayer is in the first place? Not specific prayer, not a specific prayer, but just a prayer in general. What is the function of a prayer?
Is that a generic question? You mean like in relation to religion, just or spirituality?
Well, just in relation to this practice, what do you think the prayer is doing for you? What's its function? What does it help us do? What's its result?
Well, I mean, I think it's I think it provides focus. I think it's dedication, and mindfulness. I mean, I think those are global ideas and concepts. I like if it's a highly specific outcome, I may not hit that mark if you're looking for a specific answer. I think it provides focus, single mind focus, clarity, dedication.
Yes, I agree with that. Anybody
That's my
else?
general thought.
Yes.
Anybody else have a comment? Gil?
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just going to say, in my case, it's a gateway to a meditative state. And the other thing I'm thinking about is what we discovered earlier today, is that it keeps the vibration going. These mantras and prayers, maybe they've existed for more than 2,600 years. And they do exist because there are others like us, like-minded beings, who repeat them and bring them into life. And I think that's pretty neat. I think it's very important, is a better way to put it.
Okay.
Mark, I was going to just quickly say, because my background, I grew up in the Islamic faith, and one of the reasons why there's five, like they pray 5 times, is exactly what you just said, to get back into that space of reminding you to stay tapped in. So multiple prayer times that are designated for what you just said. So I think you're spot on with that. The
Oh, thank
function.
you.
One of the benefits that I found, um, that I really didn't expect it at all, is it's deep breathing. Is it that I get in a habit of deep rhythmic breathing when I'm doing a mantra. So I was surprised at that. You can sing better.
It kind of puts you into a zone and keeps you into a zone, doesn't it? So I think, if I can just interject, I think that, the prayers are there for us to remember. It reminds us of what our motivation is. I mean, these are called the opening motivational prayers, setting our intention for our practice, for our teaching, whatever it is. And that we're kind of focusing on our space here and making this space our Buddha field, if you will. And then all the noise, all the confusion that was happening to us before we came into this space, before we started doing these prayers, they're marginalized. We're just putting them on hold. We're not doing away with them, but we're just saying, okay, I'm concentrating on this now. I'm remembering why I'm doing that. And now my time is to do this spiritual practice and not deal with all the other mundane stuff that I may need to deal with later on and like that. So it's very simple that the prayers are there to help remind us of what we're engaging in, our spirituality. And if we go back to what we said a few weeks ago, it's always a choice, isn't it? That we're making a choice to develop our mindfulness, our one-pointed mindfulness, our one-pointed focus on our spirituality. So this is the first step in helping us to do that.
Yeah, I know when I first started practicing, this is a long time ago, in the Tibetan tradition, I had like not a big, but I certainly had like an aversion to the prayers. It's like doing the prayers. I guess it's just because of my upbringing, or was viewing it through like a lens. Not that it's bad or something, but for like the religion that I grew up with. And yeah, so I found that like not off putting, but it was just kind of like, why are we doing this? Like, can we get to the real, like doing some real stuff or something? And I feel very differently about it now. And I do feel like saying it out loud too. There's something, it's more impactful for me. I realized if I say it out loud, as well as another kind of random thought about it.
No, that's completely right. Doing it out loud, because we got to set up that vibration. If you're just reading it, you're not vibrating with it. But when you say it out loud, you're using your physical body, you're using your lungs, you're using your larynx, you're using your mouth, you're using the air and everything. And intellectually, you're thinking about what you're doing. So you're engaging your physical body and your intellectual body that opens you up to your spiritual body, which is in the heart center. When you just read it, you cut yourself off from that. If that's all you're doing is just reading it quietly to yourself. Sometimes that's helpful to focus, but when you're really trying to open this up, to recite it along with knowing the meaning that you studied, then that's the result, is opening this up. Mm-hmm.
Matthew, I'm on your side, because one thing that I promised myself that I'm not going to do as a Buddhist is bash my religion of origin, which is Catholic Christianity.
Oh, no.
And I'm not going to do that because we don't do that as Buddhists. And as much as I'm tempted to do that, I don't want to do that. But I will say that, Thomas Merton, a great hero of mine, Catholic Christian. Okay. But what I will say is that my experience of prayer, like yours, Matthew, coming into Buddhism has been somewhat negative. owing to my background, because what do we always hear? Thoughts and prayers, and it's like just a cliche, right? And the problem of evil involving this great creator God who is all powerful and all knowing. But as Buddhists, we know that it's different from that, and that it's not the same prayer experience. And there's a lot of mystery in Buddhism. And I remember a few weeks ago in the Sangha, there was someone who was having problems, and Kate said, "Can I pray for you?" And I thought that was just amazing. Like, we don't know all the power of prayer as Buddhists that's out there. But what I'm saying is, I get that coming from a Christian background, that there was a little bit of a tentativeness in the beginning. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's an interesting point that you just said. Can I pray for you?
Yeah.
And I think that's something, who are we praying to as Buddhists? Who
Yes.
are we praying to? What would you say?
Lance, tell us the answer.
What was that?
You tell us the answer.
Oh, you want to know you're praying to yourself.
Bingo.
It's not out there. It's all within yourself. So you're focusing mindfully to that everything that's happening out there. We're all part of all that. It's all the equanimity. We're all part of all of this and everything. So we're reminding ourselves we can't control over that, and all the deities, everything, all the Buddha is within ourselves. We are wakening ourselves up to our Buddha nature, to our true nature. We use the word Buddha to identify that, but it's just the true nature. So whether you call it the Christ, or whether you call it God, or you call it or Allah, or you call it Yahweh, or whatever you call it, it's talking about the same thing. Some people may think, oh, it's out there. But that's one of the, I guess, an important difference in Buddhism is we say, oh, it's all in here. So we're not beseeching something out there, some mysterious being out there to intercede to some god or goddess to come in and save the day. We're the ones who's going to save our day. We're the only ones that will really do that. Does that make sense? Anybody want to talk about
Lance,
that?
Important
I
point.
struggle. Sorry, go ahead, Brendan. Go ahead.
No, I just think that's a tremendously important point, that there's, we can't lay the problem of evil at some creator God, because it's us that we're talking to, and we're not all powerful to solve it. We can only do our little bit. Sorry, that's all.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, Lance, like, it took me 2 years to understand what you just said in like 90 seconds, like, to really get it. Like, I heard the words and what you all are talking about, like, really, like, these different religions, like Allah, Muhammad, Jesus, like because we're so indoctrinated at birth into these systems, and it's like trying to separate that programming, and then understanding that Buddhism is like this DNA code that is like all these systems like can arise from, and we can explain so simply. But it took me 2 years to really understand that experientially. Like, all these people were enlightened humans, enlightened souls. They just all were. They were all Buddhas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't say that because it's going to offend everybody because of convention. But these people were all beautiful human beings dedicating their lives for the merit of others, which is what we're trying to do.
Exactly. So one of the things that we want to include in our talks, moving forward in the weeks to come, is that connection. That coming into union with this idea that we are all, this we have all this potential within ourselves, and to recognize that potential, and to be able to see that and how it manifests and so on, and to so that's what we're going to be talking about. That's a huge point, to see that we are a living Buddha. We are a living deity. We are the perfection of what it can be to be a human being. And the human beings created all these ideas. All these concepts are all human being creations. Okay. So as we get into that, as we get into those different practices and so on, and part of what we've been doing is laying a groundwork for how to do that. We've been talking about the what is it that we need to recognize, and then why do we need to recognize it. We're developing a pathway, we're developing a set of instructions and a code in which to live, and then a body of work, of instructions to follow, to be able to recognize those things that are within ourselves. So these instructions are guiding ourselves. So that's why we do these practices. Those of you who have joined us, for Medicine Buddha or for Shen Reizig, when we did Shen Reizig, or any of the other practices, there's the first part where you're doing the remembering, when you're saying the prayers, and then you go into the instruction part. You instructing you to visualize this, instructing you to sit like this, instructing you to have these things at the ready, and so on, like that, are all guides for you to have that experience. So that's part of what our practice is all about. We say we're doing a Buddha practice. We're practicing to be Buddha. So first we have to remember that that's what we're doing, the prayers, and then we use the instructions to guide us to get to that point, to get to recognize ourselves as Buddha, and to take responsibility for that, to take responsibility for our failures and not being able to do that, to not be successful, and to correct those, or to take responsibility for the success that we have and the way in which we use that success to help other beings, and not to be selfishly thinking about, oh, I'm so great, but to be able to say, oh, I've got this greatness within me, and I'm going to help other beings to see that they have it in themselves too. That's the real benefit. That's the work of the bodhisattva, to do this for the benefit of other beings, not being selfish about it. Okay, so going back to these prayers, I want to stop anything. Does anybody have any more questions or comments about any of the prayers, or the reasons why we do these, or anything like that? Okay. Well, we've all said some very interesting things, some very good things, and Bernie wrote some things into the WhatsApp earlier today, because he's putting together a website for us, and so he had some specific questions that he would like to get some feedback on to incorporate in this. The way we might look at this is that we're starting something that is going to have a lifetime to it. And we don't know how long that lifetime is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be a month, or it's going to be 2 months, or it's going to be a year, or it's going to be 5 years, or it's going to live beyond us. Because as we know, the stuff that's in this cyberspace just doesn't go away. And just like those vibrations that I was talking about, that the Buddha was teaching and generating those vibrations 2,600 years ago, those don't go away. What we're doing now, we're just harmonizing with it in a contemporary way, and in our way of doing it in the 21st century. Or what are we in the 21st century? I think so. So we're putting a different spin on it, but where's it going to be in 500 years from now? Where's it going to be in 1,000 years from now? And what small part can we play in that vibration? So we all have, we all can be part of that. We can generate that ourselves. So that's what we're trying to set up here, as a facility for that. What do you think about that? Matthew, what do you think about that idea of creating a facility for that?
What do you mean by the word facility exactly, though?
Well, facility is having some kind of a infrastructure, some kind of, a system, a structure, books or whatever, teachings or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's super important, and that's been something that's been really helpful for me about these, and why I try to like really prioritize coming to these uh groups as the one on Sunday and this one, is it offers me a certain just even beyond just the learning and everything, it offers me a certain kind of structure too. Like there's other people involved, and like I'm getting to know other people while getting the teaching. So I think it's really important thing other people can benefit. And in a similar vein with how we've gone about the classes themselves, of like building a structure for a practice, so it doesn't feel to me like there's like all of these different teachings, and then teaching of this and this and this and this, and it's like it just, which it has for me at times, it's just like it's so much, but it doesn't have that structure that we provided of like the stages of meditation, and these things are fitting in this way, and this is how you can practice them, and this is the reason why we're doing these things. So it's made a big impact on me. It's been a real blessing, all of you all in my life, in a big way, because it's really got me back into the Dharma in a way that I hadn't been for a very long time.
Well, thank you. Do you feel like it's been that has been a conversation?
Yeah, and I feel like I try to make a point to like just say, like, be as honest as possible. If like I don't, whether I don't understand this, or this teaching didn't resonate with me, it feels weird to me or something, or these forms, and I don't know how to relate to that, or whatever it may be. And um, I feel completely comfortable doing that here with you all. So it's
Very
been
good.
cool.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comment about this?
Yeah, Lance, I do. I told myself going into future Sangha meetings that I wouldn't do this because I talked too much about one of my heroes, Alan Watts. But he talked about how in the 60s, how migrating from Asia, from Zen in Japan, and that really the Dharma was coming to the West, and he was helping to bring it to the West. And I feel like that's what's happening right now. In the Chod video I was telling you about in the streets of Kathmandu, those were not Tibetans who were chanting, wearing Tibetan outfits and using the bells and things like that. And they got some criticism for that. But the Dharma is moving to the West, and we're part of that. And I think that when people look back 100, 200 years from now, we're going to be pioneers in that regard. And I think that what the infrastructure that we're building out, I think, is part of facilitating that. So that's just my 2 cents.
I
So
agree with you, Brendan. I agree with that.
do you think that, is it a trap for us in our talks to get caught in some kind of a didactic approach or too much lecturing? Do you think there's a good balance between the introduction of the you know of the scriptures, so to speak, and the conversation that we have about how it is that it impacts you? What's the practical application of that? What do you think about that? Is there a balance? Is it out of balance? Does it need to be corrected? What do you think?
I think you hit the balance right on the head, Lance, between lecturing, praying, and allowing us to give input. I think that I mean, about 1/3 of each, in my opinion, would be perfect. And I think we're about there.
Well, thank you. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, Lance, I was just going to say, because I know you and I have had the privilege of having private conversations that others haven't, gotten to hear. However, being with you for the last couple of years, the progression I've seen with how your instruction, as a mentor and guide to us, um, has evolved. Like you're getting better. Like you get the feedback from us, you continue to evolve, and I think you've become a better practitioner as our mentor and coach. And I've enjoyed watching the evolution of how you provide instruction, especially most recently in the last few months. I think it's beautiful. So
Well, thank you. And it's really, I think any teacher, is a student, but as a teacher needs to grow too. And the best teacher of a teacher or for a teacher are the students, and to listen to the students and so on, and to be able to adapt. And part of that also means that you have a core of students who are as dedicated to this process as you are as the teacher, as they're dedicated to the learning, that you're dedicated to the being able to know how to provide those teachings to them. So you guys are a huge part of that. And I was telling Pete that earlier today. He's not with us right now, but we were together today. And I was saying how sometimes I get, I feel like, oh, I just like to take off a year, or I feel like I've done enough, but and I can just retire and not do this anymore. But then, always somebody new appears with new questions, and it just sparks the enthusiasm, and it starts all over again. And whatever tiredness or whatever there was just goes away, because now there's more work to do. And that's and as I've been studying the sutras lately, the work of being a bodhisattva just never ends. And that's our goal, to be a Buddha, to recognize that true nature. We have to go through the process of becoming a bodhisattva, and becoming in those different stages until we become Buddha. So they all go hand in hand. It's all interconnected.
Lance, that's so true, because I've had moments where I'm so burned out being in the field I'm in, behavioral psychology. It's very draining. And I've always said I'm gonna go work become a barista. Like that's my, easy job, and I don't get to check out and I don't have to think about anything complicated. But then, like you said, somebody young comes in and asks a question, and I get excited again. I'm like, oh, this is why I got in it. And I lean back into it. And when I was in my 20s, this is maybe how you feel. I got a grant to go to a PhD program, and I remember when they accepted me, there was someone who really believed in me because I always asked questions, and I think I did for him what you described, always asking these questions like, "Tell me more." And he said, "You have to carry the torch. One day I have to hand the torch to you, and you have to keep the torch. Then you one day have to push the torch to the next person." I didn't understand that in my 20s. Oh my gosh, now I understand it, Lance.
Sure. Yeah.
So now I understand.
Very good. Thank you. So these questions now, these go to one of Bernie's questions, where he said, what is the unique advantage of this group that offers to people who are considering joining? So Bernie was looking for one sentence, so maybe you could offer, one sentence that, how do you think that this is an advantage for other people to join the group? Zara, what would you say?
So here's my question, because I'm thinking marketing, right? I always think about keywords that people can like read, and I'm going to overthink this, but I would ask, is this people who are already within the Buddha field that are already leaning in towards it, or people that are neutral? That's my main question, because I would change. Like if you're talking to people like that are leaning in, I would just say it's to become enlightened, and to become Buddha. If I'm talking to someone off the lay street, I would say to find some way to find peace, equanimity, some lay version of to live a happy life, basically, to live a peaceful, serene life. Come to this practice.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Would somebody else like to offer something before I call on somebody?
Modern Western society involves two crises: a crisis of meaning and a crisis of anxiety. And through the fellowship in this Sangha community, we are able to draw on the Dharma teachings of the Buddha to improve our lives and liberate ourselves from those two crises of meaning and anxiety. That's my take.
That's very good. That was meaning and anxiety. I think you said.
Anxiety
Yeah,
are two
anxiety.
tremendous crises that so many people in our country, and especially here in Northern Virginia and Fairfax County,
Yeah,
where the center is, are experiencing,
yeah.
that I experience personally.
And the anxiety is very much fear-based.
Mm-hmm.
And you're being, reciting the Green Mara Tantra is really developing fearlessness,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's so connected. That's so great.
Right. And now we have a Sangha who is helping support us
Right.
in that.
And Green Tar is going to be one of the deities that we're going to really talk about in the coming weeks.
Good.
So we're going to spend a good amount of time on Green Tar. Gavin and Karina, can I call on you? Because I know that you guys are very thoughtful about things like this, and I'd like to know what you're thinking in this regard. How would you, speak to somebody who is questioning whether should I get involved in this group or not? What would you say to them?
I'm so sure.
It depends on what their interest is. What level of anxiety do they exhibit by living in their conditions? Do they believe that they would like help? And if they would like help, then, sharing this class with them could, in my opinion, relieve a lot of their anxiety and help them come to a new path of finding rhythm of harmonizing the mind. The experience for them is something that they'll have to be interested. They have to, people have to believe that they would like something, and that's healing. So there's healing in this voyage. So come along and experience what the prayers can do for you, or just being a part of the Sangha and getting to meet everyone here can provide a lot of help. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Do you think that this is open to everybody, but do you think that this is more about finding this body of Buddhism and these icons, all these deities, all this stuff that's Buddhism? Is it more about that, or is it more about finding out what it is to be a human being?
Yeah, like what is it being human being? I think so.
So you're saying that
It's only help.
go ahead.
Sorry, I say yes.
So you say it's more like, and we're
Like
using Buddhist, and we're using these Buddha references as a means to be able to identify ourselves as what it is to be a human being.
Yes.
I would like to say that it might be a bit confusing for someone coming in to hear the word deity and not get confused with religion. And because the word deity is something of the old ways, and the gods of ancient times, or paganism, and so there'd be a lot of confusion about, well, why even bring deities into this if they're this path is about teaching of the self, you know. So I could see some confusion in this.
Well, that's a really good point. I appreciate you saying that, and I've kind of struggled with that too, in so far as how to approach that for the benefit of other beings, because I recognize that. You know, I recognize it within my own self, but I was able to reconcile it pretty early on. You know, but to help other beings who may not have the experience, you know, and so how to approach that? What would be another word that we can use, you know, to because what the deities are representing are human beings in certain situations, if you will. Maybe Bernie would have a way of characterizing this, but in certain situations, you know, it's the activity of our true nature is expressed in the way of these deities, how they behave. Are they healing beings? Are they compassionate beings? Are they fearless beings? Are they wise beings? So there's a deity that represents each one of those aspects, plus many, many more, and so on. Does anybody have a comment about that? Bernie, what do you think about that?
Well, what I always said in class when the question came up is that different deities represent the different aspects of enlightened mind. There's so different qualities of enlightenment that in order to appreciate them all, we express the different qualities through different deities. It's not that one deity has more wisdom and the other one has more compassion, but Avalokiteshvara represents compassion, whereas Manjushri represents wisdom. So we meditate separately on these two different qualities through two different deities. And of course, as you say all the time, and I say too, this is the nature of our own mind. It's hidden deep within us, and we haven't realized it yet. But all those qualities of enlightenment are somewhere deep inside of ourselves, and we're just working to bring them out.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, Bernie, that you're making of like that these things are already in a sense, in my understanding, like with our Buddha nature inside of us. That it's not like I'm chasing this enlightenment forever out there and I got to slog through everything. It's like more of a clearing away, and even with like the deities and an archetype might be a good, almost like in a Jungian sense or something, might be a good word for deities too potentially. I don't know, but and just to like what we were asking before, and Bernie, I could get you something more concise for what you're doing. Is it I'm more long-winded than I'm not as good of a writer as Brandon on the fly. But I think for the thing I really like about this group is, well, I mean, lots of things, but one is a big conundrum that I found myself in. I was very attracted to the teachings of the Buddha, just like that. As soon as I found out about it, I was at a very low point in my life, and I was extremely drawn to it for whatever reason. And particularly with Tibetan Buddhism, for me, and it's not putting down any other tradition, I feel like it's the most to me it's the most profound version of Buddhism, or the most comprehensive, or something like that. But it's also so tied into it's so melded with Tibetan culture and Tibetan cultural forms, in my opinion, like more so than other forms of Buddhism, that it becomes very different, or that it's different in that way. And so much of what was causing me problems earlier in my practice is like it's almost like felt like I had to force myself to be Tibetan almost in some way. Like I don't know if that makes sense. And it always created this kind of dissonance. And with the approach of this group that I found very valuable is it's like translated into that it still feels authentic to the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, but it in a way that's like embracing the fact like, okay, I'm a Westerner, and like that's not a bad thing. I can figure out new ways to practice it, and like in this open way, and I don't have to do this thing of like trying to, which is really impossible to do, of like change my cultural context somehow, and then like, I don't know. Again, that's a very long-winded type of response to it. I could come up with something more pithy if you need, Bernie, for what you're working on. But to me, that's at the heart of that, and the community of it is at the heart of what I find so valuable about the way this group particularly is.
You know, Lance,
Yes.
it's Mark. I keep coming back to three things about the Sangha. And I'm not sophisticated enough to really address the things that everybody's talking about right now. But my experience so far, which may be of interest to you at least, is I see the practice as moving me closer to my heart center, number one, and at the same time giving me the opportunity for a wider life.
A wider,
life.
Li-
Wider, WIDER.
life.
Yes, a wider life. And I keep being struck, and it's resonated with me ever since the first time I read the words, that we're here to bring other to enliven other sentient beings. And as in one of the prayers tonight, there's this thing about I forget which prayer it was, about bringing enlightenment to those who hate me, and so that they'll find happiness and therefore be relieved of aversion to me. And that it just seems so appropriate to my way of thinking about life. You know, like, well, I don't know a better way to put it. But anyway, that's what's bouncing around in my head. And I'm glad to be here.
Well, very good. Thank you very much. That's very good. Yes. Gil and Christy, what would you say? Because Gil and I have been friends now for a number of years, and Gil has a very good background, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was first introduced to Tibetan Buddhism through the Gelugpa tradition, which is a wonderful tradition. It's the tradition of the Dalai Lama. But then when he came up here and we met, and we're in the Kagyu tradition. And Gil, would you like to speak to that, or anything else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I was fortunate to, because the Gelugpa don't believe that you can reach enlightenment unless you are a monk and you are in a monastery. The Kagyu doesn't hold that view at all. I mean, they may, but they don't tell us that. So, I think it's a little more forthcoming than the Gelugpa is. But the Gelugpa is a fine, and I mean, they are all about traditions and holding that together. They're really, that's the crux of that's it, right at the center of the Gelugpa tradition, is that the Dalai Lama is saving the Tibetan culture, that is the center of that. Whereas I find that this is more open to just people that want to learn about Buddhism. And so what would I look for in a group? It's here, let me turn on my video here so y'all can see. My hair's not really like that. It's much different color. So is that am I going to be able to make any money off these people?
I beg your pardon? Say that
Am
again.
I going to be able to make any money off these people? How are these people going to progress me in my life? How that's what is the benefit of this going to be to me? What kind of group is this? Are these people really serious? Are they fun to be around? What how am I going? That's what I look for when I'm going to join a group, is how is it going to profit me? And I made a joke, but nobody ever understands my jokes, but about money being the thing there. So obviously that's not it. But here, am I going to progress on the path? is this going to be an advantage to me? Am I going to be a better person as a result of this place? Am I going to learn from these people? That's what I think of. I don't know.
What do you think about for me, yeah, I was surprised at how much psychology, modern psychology, is in the scriptures, is in the teachings of the Buddhism and so on, and how much of astronomical science, and microbiology and so many different modern day sciences are embedded in the teachings. What do you think about that? Has that ever crossed your mind? Anybody? Gil?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was talking to someone about the benefits of doing a practice every day for several months. That after a while, that what you're doing, we call them prayers, but it's really operant conditioning. This is, I am telling myself that I am going to be a different kind of person, that I am going to react in different ways to situations in life. And I'm doing it every day for an extended period of time. I mean, that was extended to me, because I never gave any thought to it. So that's one of the things that I found is that the teachings are very much about how to transform yourself from being a self-centered, greedy person, angry person, or a needy person, into being a more giving, kind, and loving, or a bodhisattva. So that's.
Gail, are you a behavioral psychologist?
I beg your pardon?
You just said one of my buzzwords. You said operant conditioning. That's one of my words. I'm a behavior analyst. What are you? Are you a behavioral psychologist?
No, no, no. I did go to AA for several years. So
Well, that's a good. Hey, listen, the 12-step book is a book everyone needs to read once. That's a good book.
That's a practical application, right?
It really
so,
is.
no, in no way am I a psychologist. However, I've been in therapy most of my life. For one, because I was born with a learning. They didn't call it a learning disability. I had a behavior problem, but I am so old. There weren't psychologists. We wrote on rocks.
Okay. Well, you just said a cool word, so I perked up there. I agree with what you said. I think everything you just said, like I'm the one who's changing every day. Like I'm just like softer now than I was years ago. I'm just like doesn't matter, like just and I agree with what you said. It's changing habits in our intention, the actions, everything we're doing, and then like over time it's been like I told Lance, now I can see it after 2 or 3 years. I'm like, who I was a few years ago when I started with Lance is not who I am now, and it's just been every day I tried to meditate, and I was inconsistent for like a year. It'd be like maybe I'll do it today, maybe I won't, and now I'm like, now I'm doing that. Now I'm evolving, and I'm like, I can look back and I'm like, wow, who I was 3 years ago. It's just like you said, small habits, and now I'm just happier. What joyful. I'm more joyful. It's not happiness, it's joy. I'm joy. I have joy now. Even bad things, like I have a major roof leak right now, like that's going to cost a lot of money. I'm okay with that. It did not ruin my day. Like I'm just like, okay, next. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Like a couple years ago, this would have ruined my day. It's not ruining my day. It's going to be all right.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Gavin, because you always ask or you bring up observations of Buddhism in the light of, if I may, occultism or esoteric philosophy or something like that. How does that square with you? What do you think of the Buddhism in those kinds of terms? Because obviously you've done some reading or some thought in that direction. How do you see the Buddhism in the face of that?
Well, the Buddha, I believe, what the first Buddha is just a reincarnation of other enlightened entities that were forgotten from the amnesia of our civilization. And in school, people, the way the government teaches is to not train the mind to think that maybe Atlantis was a real civilization. And maybe the reason we aren't allowed to Cuba is because the Cubans teach their children in schools that they are the descendants of their ancestors from Atlantis that occupied that part of the world. And that just opens up a whole book of lost knowledge that would make children in schools question more, instead of being complacent to accepting things like, well, is this first Buddha, is this the real first incarnation of the spirit? Well, if we have amnesia from not remembering other continental civilizations, even they say Lemuria was a continent off the coast of the western United States. It occupied several of the Polynesian islands. There's a whole civilization there that's been forgotten. Or another continent called Mu, and the civilization of Mu. And truly what the human form, how it even came into existence to occupy a body. And where in Buddhism do we learn about these different phases of history that could teach? But Buddhism is about it's about seeing the matrix and knowing that you alone are the only entertainer in the theater of your mind, right? So I don't know. It's interesting, like the Buddha rebirth. The first reincarnation of Buddha was Lopon Rinpoche, and who brought Buddhism to Tibet and initiated the Book of the Dead, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is identified as the Buddha returned. Now, that was what, in 800.
So you're talking about Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava.
Padmasambhava, yeah, in Sanskrit. The guy who I thought was Buddha reincarnated. He could train everybody in the Buddhist Book of the Dead, and which I don't know much about. But once again, it's like, if so much knowledge about history has been put under the blanket, then it's easy to market things to people like we're the most advanced civilization ever on the planet, and the United States holds the reign on this type of movement, and but if the truth were revealed, it would be a completely different setting. So one of the questions I have about Buddhism is, why aren't women allowed to be in the to be monks? And are we witnessing a time when women will be able to become monks and go and teach others? Or is it always going to be a patriarchal control like we see of all religions? And how deep down the rabbit hole that gets with the ego of men, and how egotistical some would say Buddhism is, that it doesn't allow women to have a voice. So there's a lot to think about when asking the question of the esotericism. And it seems like until women really get their equality, I mean, it's like you got to balance all of the legislatures of the world. And if America is the top ranking expression of things to come for other nations, why can't we seemingly do this right away? And esoterically, that when women get their unifying grace alongside the equal strength of men, like the human form could then begin to evolve and get to its next level of spiritual understanding. And that's like far out. I don't know how long down the line this type of equality comes.
Well,
you know.
I think that's a very important point that you just made, and there's two things that happen there. And again, Bernie might have a better articulate way of saying this than I can, but there is the culture of Buddhism that has that, you know, that masculine dominant thing going on and so on. But then there's the fundamental teaching of the Buddhism, the philosophy and the practice and so on, which all this comes from the mother, all this comes from the feminine. And it's clearly recognized as that. And the male is just the actualizer of that wisdom that comes from the mother. So there is this complete balance and synergy in the teachings of the Buddhism. So at this point, you know, we may not be recognizing that because we haven't been introduced to those teachings, but I can tell you that they are there because I'm involved with that myself, and so and maybe this is part of the dynamic of what's happening with the Eastern monastics or the Eastern culture coming to the West, and that's going to be one of the things that changes over the next, you know, 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years or something, that more of that opens up and becomes, you know, more practical in the contemporary minds of people as they are now. So, so that's a very interesting point that you just made.
But thank you. I appreciate the questions as well, and having fun tonight.
So,
Listen to everybody.
well, thank you. Thank you. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at, we've been kind of exploring, you know, through an open conversation of a contemplation. We're contemplating this, we're contemplating that, we're looking at some cultural things, we're looking at some esoteric things, we're looking at all these different things, and it's like a verbal, you know, inner contemplation that we're having, which is this exploration. And this is part of the practice. This is part of the Buddha practice. You know, if somebody were to say to you, well, what does Buddha practice means? Well, we're practicing to be Buddha. We're practicing through remembering. We're practicing through the instructions as a guidance for us, that this is the way we go through these stages, the structure, and then we get to this point where we begin to explore, you know, and nothing is out of bounds. Everything is possible, and we're looking at all that possibilities. And even the possibility that everything that we're thinking about doesn't make any sense. And that we're just creating these things just out of the opportunity to do that and to have this conversation.
Yes.
So then we come to the point of meditation. The meditation is the letting go, is the release of all this stuff, all the remembering, letting go of that, all the instructions, all the guidance, letting go of that, all the conversation, all the contemplation, all the exploration, letting go of that, and becoming that non-dual, unelaborated, non-objectifiable, that is beyond human ability to recognize. It can be experienced as a human being, and it forever changes us individually. And there's many, 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 many people. There's many brothers and sisters like us who are functioning, you know, in the world today, have functioned in the world and have passed on and so on. And we're just part of what's happening and so on, has always happened and will continue to happen. There's always going to be the ignorance. There's always going to be the samsara, but there's always going to be enlightenment as well. So we're making a choice to, well, let's get on board with this enlightenment thing and see. And there's not even an effort to say, well, let's see what happens. I mean, there's a natural tendency to want to say that, I just said it, but it's past that. There's no words for it. So this is what Buddha practice is. This is what we've named this group, the Buddha practice study, the study of Buddha practice. The one thing that unites us all is the practice of being Buddha, of being the awakened one. That's what we're trying to communicate. That's what we're trying to offer. That's what we're trying to describe here. So this is like a mission statement for us going forward. Each of these things is an experience. The reminders, the instructions, the guidance, the contemplation, the releasing, it's all an experience to enjoy and stabilize in everyday conduct. That whatever we get out of this, each and every single session, we take with us after we get up off the cushion. And that whatever field of influence that we may have in the world, we become that influence. We do, and we do it out of bodhicitta that makes it possible.
Lance, I have a question kind of related to what you're talking about right now. What is so Dharma guardian, is that a very technical word within Buddhism?
A Dharma guardian?
Yes.
Well, Dharma guardian or a Dharma protector, it's a being.
Okay.
And they talk about it in many different levels, a spiritual being that is there to help promote the Dharma teachings, support the Dharma teachings, preserve the Dharma teachings, give them facility, to be able to be, brought about, that they're not allowed to fall into some kind of atrophy or something like that.
So is hypothetically everyone who's participating and leaning in, even on this Zoom call, someone who could be a Dharma guardian?
Sure, certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
I'm wondering, does anyone else, like, now that you've leaned into Buddhism and you're embracing it, do you feel a responsibility to not egotistically disseminate, but when you find opportunity where someone is leaning into you, like asking you questions, do you feel a responsibility to open up and share, or are you finding yourself hiding away from talking about it? So I'll give examples because I see a lot of people wearing mala beads that people will ask me randomly, what do those beads mean to you? Why are you wearing them? But I find that that's a point of conversation. And I use that as a natural opening to just describe it as simply as possible without overcomplicating it with technical language. I'm wondering how many of you feel like some sort of dedication to being, I guess, trying to be Buddha, action bodhicitta, I guess, when the opportunity, or do you find yourself shying away from those opportunities in conversation or in different ways? I don't know. I'm curious.
Well, I was born in the South. My mama was a Southern Baptist lady, and I have the affliction of being that I have to change the world. I have to enlist everybody. Everybody has to become a Buddhist, but I try to keep that under wraps and to not fall sway to that. And I think when you said answering questions is the key. Otherwise, I get, then like you said, over talking it.
I tend to err on the side of not doing that, Zara, for better or worse. Of like, or not wanting to, this isn't what you're saying, but like evangelize in some way or something. If Yeah, I mean, if people talk, I mean, there's people I've talked to about it or know I'm interested and see if they're interested. I'll talk to them about it and stuff. But for me, maybe it's just a personal thing of like, I don't know. I don't know why, but I wouldn't want to, for me at least, like go around trying to like get people to be Buddhist or not Buddhist or something. Yeah, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's kind of my, at least my natural disposition around it or intuition around it.
Zara, you remind me of a quote, which was, "You are what you have to defend," right? Which is in the spirit of what you were saying. I'll just say personally, I have a tremendous need to belong to something. And recently, I was at the Tibet shop in Washington D.C. in Adams Morgan, taking my daughter to the Kennedy Center for her birthday. And after we bought some beads, the lady that worked there, why'd me, and I did that. I could have hugged her when she did that. I mean, it made me so happy, and I returned that to her. But that's just an anecdote about how I feel. My wife appreciates the Dharma path. She thinks it's a good thing for me. She's not ready to embark on it herself, and so what I try to do is be a good example in the house and be calm and a good husband and not shove it down her throat. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's how I see it.
I'm just enjoying listening to everyone else's responses in relation to like this group and then how we all see ourselves, right? Like how we see ourselves and then how we relate to the context of the ultimate goal, which is we're interconnected, like Lance was saying, like we are all like the same, right? Like we like if I like goodness I do for myself, I'm actually doing for Matt, for Lance, for Bernie. It's me doing one kind action is helpful for us all. Like it's all the same energy source. Like, and so like understanding that at a profound level and living that day to day is hard because it's easy to like be selfish and be like, oh, this is my kid, this is my job, like the my word, this is I got to protect this, like the four causes of suffering. And just like letting go and like I'll give you an example. Like I pick up trash and I used to get mad about littering. Like I used to be like, oh, these a-holes who litter. Now I'm like, this is my trash. I did this. My mindset changed. And I'm like, I'm gonna pick up my trash and put it in the garbage. And now I'm not angry about it. I'm just like, I'm so excited I get to pick up the trash. I'm like, thank you. I need to pick up after myself because that person's trash is my trash. Like it's all interconnected. I'm like, wonderful.
How
And
do you do that? How do you do in my neighborhood? It's the same thing, and I pick up after these people, and I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like, how do you do that, Zara? I want to.
well, it took me a couple years. I mean, it's through this practice where I changed my mindset. I can't change the behavior of others. What I said was, this is an opportunity for me to just be like, thank you, universe, for putting this in my path. Like I pick up pennies too when I walk across pennies. I'm like, thank you, universe, for the penny. And then I share and I think about I'm going to share this with someone who needs money. But I had to shift my mindset, Brendan, like a couple years. Yesterday I was like, oh, and then I cringed. I was like, don't cringe, just pick it up and recycle it and be thankful that you're taking care of the earth and be grateful that someone gave you the opportunity to engage in good karma. Like picking it up allowed me the consequence of engaging in good karma and creating and getting merit. So I had to change my mindset basically. I had to change my mindset and it took me a couple years because otherwise that would just make me angry. Years ago, I spent a lot of time being angry and mad about it, and it just isn't useful. It's so non-productive.
I think that's like the greatest advertisement or something for like Dharma practice or to like spread maybe even like other people practicing Dharma is like they see that and then they're like, why aren't you upset about this? Can you believe this? And they see like some like genuine change or transformation or peace. And then it opens up a conversation like, well, how the hell are you doing that? And then you like talk to people about it. I think that kind of thing is, I think the best way to spread the teachings is like through seeing the impact that the teachings have.
Well, that's all
Pretty cool.
very great. We're running out of time. I want to ask Bernie something, but before I do, Gavin just turned on his microphone, so maybe he's got something to say briefly. And then I want to ask Bernie because this is maybe the first or second time that he's been in our meeting like this, and to hear everybody speaking like this really goes to his questions that he was putting on WhatsApp, and I want to get what this means to him. So, but first, Gavin, would you like to make your comment, please?
I was just responding to Zara's fascinating talk about trash. And one of the ways that I was able to neutralize that was just visualizing that there'd be a technology that will be invented that eats trash, like some sort of bacteria. And, you know, it will all be taken care of. The earth's going to be here. We're not going to be here. So why struggle in our minds with hate? Anyways, I bid myself adieu to hear Bernie. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That's very good. Maybe AI will devise that technology. Just don't
I
get your
don't think
foot
so.
don't get your foot
I don't
caught
think
in the trash can.
Oh, you mean eat
Might eat
trash?
that too.
Might happen. Might happen. Might happen.
So Bernie,
Uh,
what do you think of this? What how's this land on
Well,
you?
it's interesting listening to what people reasons are for being members, what they've
Can you
gotten
move
out
your
of
mic
the group.
your camera up a little bit because we're seeing your mouth moving. You look like Senor Wences, with the
It depends my distance from the camera, unfortunately. I move closer and it gets my body. I move further back and it loses me. So depends how I sit in my chair. I have to figure out a way to fix that. Okay, so what the question was? Yeah, it was interesting learning about what people thought was the reasons the what they got out of being a member of the group, and it gives me something to think about. And I wrote down jotted down a few phrases here and there, but I don't think I have everything I need, but it certainly is enough to start. So, and it's, I'm coming into this group new and you're asking me to do the website. So it's good to hear what everybody else has to say because, I'm the least qualified to write some of this stuff. So anything more you want?
Well, I just want to know how it landed on you. What do you think about this?
Uh,
Do,
it's,
do,
I
yeah,
don't
good.
know. It's always interesting listening to people and hearing what their stories are, what they get out of the Dharma, and what they think are the important points. I don't know what more to say about it than that. I'm just appreciating what everybody has to say, and I find it very interesting. I mean, I can't really add anything to what everybody says because it's a very individual thing.
So
What
one of the things that
get out of
we're thinking about doing in the future is inviting certain monastics to come in and have like a question and answer with the
that would be
monastic.
great.
Have a topic that we want to focus on, and then have a questioner who is kind of leading the process, the event and so on, but also making it open that we, the other people in the group can ask questions and so on, and let the conversation kind of go on as this conversation is going on by itself and so on. And I think that's going to be a very healthy thing to do that. And we know some really great monastics who would add a lot to that and who would appreciate this format, would appreciate this kind of way of developing, a conversation and so on. That I think they would appreciate because they're many of them are in the United States to begin with, or in the West, because they see this opportunity, for Buddhism to expand, to grow, and so on like that. So to have thoughtful people processing and expressing themselves helps them to recognize, well, what is this going to be, for the next generation and the generation after that and so on, because they are, of course, an integral part of what that change is going to be. So I think that this group, what we're talking about is going to be very, very interesting.
Hey Lance, I know we only have like a couple minutes. I just summarize because I'm like connecting the dots on the whole conversation, and I'll go into WhatsApp and look at the questions. I didn't get to log in today. Matt said something that I think significant about the Tibetan aspect of Buddhism, and like that being maybe a little bit not overwhelming, but just different for the Western culture. And like, is this an opportunity where there's sort of not that we're taking away from the fundamental principles of it, but morphing or shaping this into an accessible spiritual practice that meets sort of the Western culture, right? Like where I don't know, like Matthew, you said that earlier, and that was something I struggled with as well. Like when you said that like 10, 15, 20 years ago, that was also something that was difficult for me to separate a lot of the Tibetan culture aspect out of the Buddhism. So, and then you said like we were talking about like sort of we're pioneering, right? Something right now, and like how do we keep the core principles intact, the integrity, and then bring them into the West, right, where we're figuring that out. So that was just sort of like from what Bernie's doing and trying to do and what we're getting out of it as Westerners, right? Like the use of this inside the Western context versus the Eastern context, because the contingencies are a little different. The suffering is the same, but the contingencies are the way that the suffering looks is a slightly different. So I don't know, I was just thinking out loud as listening to everyone. So I'm a little bit slow, but I'll go into WhatsApp and check it out.
Well, that's great. No, you're right, and I think that's right. And what we're doing is we're taking and applying, what we learned from the Buddha, and applying that to our 21st century human experience, and allowing that to bring happiness and peace and bliss to us all. That we're recognizing that it's within ourselves, that we have that wisdom, we have that possibility, and we're looking at how it's been done and how we can change ourselves and guide it for our children and their children, etc. So unless somebody else has something that you would like to say, I'd like to do the dedication. Does anybody have something you'd like to close with?
Just 20 seconds, Zara. You read my mind. I was thinking the same thing. And there's very advanced teachings and advanced practices in tantric Buddhism that I'm not ready for yet. And maybe getting into meditational deities might be too advanced even for someone who's never been involved before. So it's all a matter of what people are ready for.
Lance, this is Christy. I just want to thank you for inviting me and Gil to be part of the sauna.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thank you, Christy. I'm glad you're there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Christy's a very thoughtful person. She is really good. All right, well then let's do the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgun on page 21 and 22. We use this because it's so comprehensive. It's so concise and gets right to the point and hits so many aspects of the diamond. So we recite this, so please recite it out loud. You may turn your microphones off so we don't bleed with each other, but recite it out loud in English, and think about the meaning as you do it, please. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you. This is a dream come true.
Lance, this was very excellent.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm glad to be here. I really am.
Well, thank you for being here. All right, guys. Thursday night we'll be doing Medicine Buddha. So everybody is welcome to join us. And if anybody, I'm sending out some new booklets, and Medicine Buddha is going to be part of it. If you don't have the Medicine Buddha text, so you're going to have that very soon. And I hope you join us because Medicine Buddha is for everybody because everybody is sick.
Theata, Om Begonze, Begonze.
Hey Lance, I never got the packet. Did you mail me a packet a couple weeks ago? Or no?
I sent you the card that had the card with the this card with the shamatha meditation in it. The
Yeah, I never
illustrated.
I never got it. I wondered, did other
You
people
never
get
got that?
No, did other people get their packets? I never
Everybody
Yeah,
else
got it.
got it.
we got
We got ours, say.
Well,
Okay.
all right. Well, I'm glad you just said something. I'll put it in the package that's going in the mail tomorrow for you.
Okay. Or you can, or you
I'll
can
add that. What address should I be sending it to?
the one you've been using, 11 Westmont Drive. Or you can send it to me and I'll print